This is the YouTube version of the Hidden Experience audio podcast. This show is hosted by Mike Cleland, and that's me, and it is available on most of the popular podcast platforms. Just search out Hidden Experience Audio. And if you want to support the show, you can find it on Patreon, as well as Buy Me a Coffee. This YouTube version has ads, but the audio version is always ad-free. And you can also join my YouTube channel here. And now the show. Audio conversation with Robin Lassiter, recorded Friday, April 19th, 2024. I first heard about Robin back in October of 2001, when she was a guest on Stuart Davis's remarkable podcast, Artists and Aliens, and there will be a link to that episode in the show notes. I reached out to her after listening to that show, and we talk about our first conversation in this episode. And we talk about a lot more, too, including her book, Earth, a Love Story. One thing that comes up as a sort of theme in this show is the act of surrendering. Robin confronts this with such poetic tenderness, and she shares the challenges and joys that come with something that we might see as negative. We explore what it means to surrender, and these questions about surrendering permeate this interview. Now, I need to give you, the listener, a heads up. This is not an easy episode. Some of Robin's life experiences have been very difficult, and she doesn't shy away from these dark moments. She speaks about them with a clarity and sensitivity that left me inspired and hopeful. So yes, there's some darkness, but there is a lot of beauty in this show too. We talk about her upbringing in a remote corner of Colorado. She grew up in a home built by her parents, who had sought out a back-to-the-land life of solitude in the forest. I gotta say, I am so envious of this idyllic chapter of her life story. Her book is a memoir, and it is also available in spoken episodes on her podcast, and I cannot recommend this highly enough. Her reading of her memoir is tremendously powerful and moving. Presently, this is free, but there might come a day when this will require a fee. She also has her own podcast, and I was a guest on her show. This podcast is also called Earth, a Love Story. She also does coaching, tarot readings, and past life and between lives regressions. All of this is available at her site, honeyheart.org. That's honeyheart, all one word, .org. And there will be a link in the show notes. This interview is about an hour and a half long, and at the end there will be an extra 9 minutes of audio. This is Robin's reading of her preface from her book. This short clip should give you a good insight into the mood and power of her reading of Earth, a Love Story. Please enjoy. Robin, I want to thank you so much for saying yes to this interview. It means a lot to me.
Oh, it's my great pleasure to be here with you, Mike. Thanks so much for asking.
Hey, before we get into the weird stuff, I want to ask about how you grew up and your life growing up.
My life growing up includes a lot of weird stuff, but the prosaic parts of it were that I grew up very close to nature, very close to the land. My parents were back to the lander hippies, and I grew up in a geodesic dome with solar power and well water and chickens and horses, and the nearest neighbor was a mile away, and didn't have television for a long time, didn't have much of anything for a long time. And so grew up very close to the natural world, very close to my family, and very sensitive to the wild natural world. So had a lot of experiences with kind of the spirits of place and just nature itself as a kid. And of course, at that time, didn't know that that was not a usual childhood or that it was different than anyone else's. It was just my full reality.
Oh, let me just ask, like, simple things, like what kind of animals were around the house, and what was winter like where you were living?
Yeah, so lots of animals, lots of cats, and experienced a lot of like kittens being born, and we always had dogs. And I think that the first horse came into the valley when I was a year old. So my life, all of my memories include times that we had horses as well. And we had bees. We had a beehive that was wonderful.
And do you still have bees?
No, I wish I did. I would really love to get bees again, but not right now. Yeah. But I've always, I've moved a lot of times in my life, and oftentimes if I've moved somewhere, I've tried to have a beehive. I've tried to recreate that because it was so wonderful and magical. And it was a very, like, my memory of it is very idyllic.
My word. I can.
It was like running around barefoot and and being with my family and being around animals. We had chickens and we let them hatch babies. So we had baby chicks and we had turkeys and geese and so it was a very wonderful, idyllic childhood, but it was also hard. And it took me a long time to realize that, like, as an adult looking back, like, oh wow, it was very physically hard to live like we did. It requires chopping wood, cutting wood all summer so that there's enough, because that was the only source of heat that we had in the house was a wood stove. And it was the only thing that we had to cook with as well. We cooked on a wood stove when I was growing up.
My word. So you were like this would have been like in the 1970s or 80s?
I was born in 79. So this is like the 80s that I was growing up. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So this is like, there's not many people who can say they like heated their house and cooked their food on a wood stove. I mean, this is stuff out of like Little House on the Prairie rather than something that was taking place when Ronald Reagan was president.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was very, again, I didn't know that it wasn't normal, but I have a lot of memories that I realize are very unique memories. Like, we didn't have, for a long time, we didn't have running water. So there was a windmill with a hand pump, and my folks would walk across the valley to the windmill, fill up a 5-gallon bucket, bring it back, pour it into the wood cook stove. There was like a vessel that you could fill up in the wood cook stove, and the wood stove would heat the water. And then there was a spigot that would come down, and you could open the spigot and fill up, the water for a bath or, to do dishes or whatever. And so, in the summers when it was really, really hot, the wood cook stove would go on early in the morning and try to do all the cooking early in the day so that then the heat would clear out from the house. In this place, in this valley, which is where I live now, but always very connected to a closer connection to survival than I think most people had. We didn't pay someone to hook up gas or electric to the house that we then used to stay warm. It was like, you got to go into the forest, cut the trees, and the wood, keeps us warm. So it was a very close relationship to like existence and survival. And it was very like idyllic and romantic, but it was hard. I mean, we were poor. My folks were poor, and it was a very physically demanding existence for them and us as well. Like, we started working as soon as we could work. Like, we had chores. It took the whole team to run this place.
Wow. So I think that there's going to be two types of people that are going to hear this. Mm-hmm. One person is going to say, that sounds awful.
Right.
They're going to hear you say that. And then there's another type of person, they're going to say, that sounds so wonderful. And I'm certainly on the wonderful camp in that thing, because I'm envious. I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, and it looked like every other neighborhood in America, and the strip malls looked like any other place in America, and I watched a lot of crappy TV and ate a lot of junk food, but I've lived in places with a wood burning stove. lots of places with a wood-burning stove, and I've used a wood-burning stove to heat a home, a bunch of homes. We had other forms of heat too, but we accompanied the wood-burning stove as far as how to heat the home. And I don't meditate. People ask, "Oh, what do you do? Meditate?" And I was like, "Oh no, I light the stove in the morning." Mm-hmm. And that's a accurate way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something special about it. And especially getting our own firewood, there's such a relationship with the land, and it's a very different kind of heat. It's like it warms you all the way to your bones.
Oh yeah, it's radiant. Yeah.
Wood stove. Yeah, it's like really good heat. Yeah. So I mean, my interpretation of it now that I'm an adult, and like when I became an adult, was that I was in the camp of like, that's really cool and amazing. That's a great childhood. I'm very lucky to have had that. Like, even though it was hard, and we have a driveway that's about a quarter of a mile long, or maybe a little longer. And in the winter, there's no way that we could get the vehicle, if whatever like crappy vehicle we owned, up the road. It was just not possible. There was no tractor, there was no plow, there was nothing. And so what we would do is load all of the groceries onto sleds, mm-hmm. and then walk the sleds up the road. And, in the dark, cold, we were 8, we were kids. Like it was work. It was a lot of hard work, but it was like audacious of my parents to do something like that and then not give up. They both had, lived in the world before they did this. They both knew what it was like to flip a switch and have heat and light. And it's amazing that that they did it, with 2 little kids, and stuck out the really tough times, and turned this place over 50 years into this is my perception, but into like a paradise. You can see the land has responded to us being here for 50 years, and it's like a park. It's beautiful.
Oh. Presently, you're heating your home with wood. Mm-hmm. And you cut it yourself still?
Yeah, it's very precious. I came, I have this big, long, crazy life story, and the spoiler is that I came back to the valley that I grew up in. So I live in the valley where I grew up, and I live across from the dome that I grew up in on the other side of the valley, and I built my own dome. And actually, the wood stove that I use was sitting in a barn for 40 years, and it was the wood stove that I grew up with.
Oh, my word.
It's this, like little, I can't remember the brand name of it, but it's blue, and it has these little gnome feet that are like really these brass feet that have gnomes on them that are very beautiful. And it's not the most efficient stove in the whole world. Like it's very old, and it was great quality at the time. And then it sat in a barn, for many, many years. And when I was building this dome and got to the point when it was time to okay, it's winter's coming, I'm going to move into it, we pulled it out of the barn, my folks and I, and sanded it, refinished it, and installed it here. So I have the same little wood stove that I did as a kid, which is really cool.
Oh my gosh, my heart is just singing right now.
It's really beautiful. Yeah. It was an idyllic childhood, and there's a lot of things about my life right now that I feel very fortunate to experience.
You've heard enough about my end of the things, but I've spent a lot of time in the West. I was working in the outdoors, so I would spend a month out at a time, and I did that every summer, sometimes 2 times a summer for, depending on how you look at it, about 17 to 25 years. There's a couple points in there where I worked a little less and worked a little more, but yeah. So I feel like I have a unique relationship to the outdoors and to the wilderness in ways that most people cannot even understand. Mm-hmm. I will literally show them pictures of the work I did, and they'll turn their head and not quite even know which way is up sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell stories about the outdoor work that I did. I mean, you go for 30 days and you basically take one set of clothes for 30 days and do the hardest work you're ever going to do and not change your clothes. people hear that and they see pictures and your clothes are filthy, right? So you're just drinking, like the hot chocolate dribbles down the front of your shirt and you wipe your sleeve on your, and so you're filthy and you've got, your sunblock, it's like the greasy sunblock that's caked up on your face and stuff. And people see the pictures and they're horrified. Mm. And you're like, oh, no. Like I've seen people at their very best where there's nothing interfering with the community. And we would go out with a team of 12 or 15, usually around there. And we would, depending on where we were, sometimes you're in a place where you might pass someone on the trail, but essentially you're seeing no one else but your own community. And you can make of that community whatever you want. And I found that, women's hair would get really greasy and everyone's nose would be peeling. And you're climbing a tent with 3 people and you knew what everyone's socks smell like. But people were alive in a way that I simply do not see people alive in that way in my normal day-to-day existence. It's people sang out loud more, they laughed more, really, really powerful set of life experiences. And it's a lot of work. So what you're saying is like, I get that part of the equation, but the value that comes from that, the insights, let's say, we live in a culture where the hard work has been eliminated little by little, step by step, invention after invention, and the value of that is just remarkable. I mean, something as simple as 1 spoon. It's like 30 days. And then, I would do 2 trips a summer. You go out for 30 days, you come back, take 1 shower, whoosh, get right back in the bus and do another trip. And that was electric in my soul. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know that feeling. I know what you're talking about. It's, there's a lot of reasons that I came back here, but part of it is that I wanted to have to do hard things. Because we, like you said, we don't have to we can make our lives pretty comfortable. Most of us can, and pretty physically comfortable. And so I wanted to come back and do hard things. And you asked if we still, cut the firewood. And that's what my dad and I spend the summers doing. We go up and we see trees that are, that are going to be dead in a year. And we take them, and I'm terrified. Like I can't, he's trying to teach me to cut down trees. I think it's the most dangerous thing I've ever seen in my life.
With a chainsaw?
I don't do that. Yeah, with a chainsaw. But I can cut them into bolts. Like once they're on the ground, I, limb them, cut them into bolts. We move them, we stack them, we cure them, we split them. It's the, the pastime in the summer other than the garden. And there's nothing better. There's just nothing better than that. And, what you described, like being with those people and, doing hard work and being dirty and just being so in something and it being so alive, that is my romantic idea of what was happening, like what my parents were seeking in the 70s and 80s and why they came to this place. And I think that I would love to see that spark reignite. And I know there's people doing it, like people are doing back to the land stuff. And it's a very, very beautiful thing. And it's very hard, and understandably, people give up pretty quickly. I'm very fortunate and lucky because my folks went first, and then I was able to come back and, the fence for the garden's already built. And, when I was a kid, there was no chainsaw. So it was like an axe in the woods. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, it was, I get the benefit of living this kind of life with a lot more ease than my folks had. But I'm trying to find that balance between I want to work hard. I want to, feel the labor that it takes to keep us warm during the winter. And also chainsaws are great. Thank you for the chainsaw. I don't really want to cut the trees down myself. So yeah.
Yeah. You said something, I wanted to do hard things, and I'm going to ask a question now. Mm-hmm. You wrote a book. How was that?
It was a very hard thing. It was definitely a hard thing. You've written books.
It's hard. Oh, my word. Oh, my word. Nobody ever understands.
It's the hardest, yeah.
I've said this before. I think I may have said it to you even. You walk into a bookstore. like a big giant Barnes & Noble, and I can just feel the palpable resonance from every single one of those books. You know, some of them are not as heartfelt as other ones, but boy, people poured their soul into those things, and there they are, just like radiating that life energy, that hard life energy. Mm-hmm. And yeah, wow. So I want to hear about your book.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for asking. Thank you for being a part of my journey with my book. We can definitely talk about that as well. I know what you mean. I actually didn't feel that way about books until I wrote my own. And now every time I go into a bookstore, I was like, oh, I get it. Before they were just these artifacts. Like, how hard could it be to write a book? And now I'm like, oh, right.
Yeah, it's easy to start a book. That's my joke. It's not a joke, but it's easy to start a book. Boy, is it tough to finish one.
Yeah. It was amazing. It was a journey. It was like an alchemical journey to write the book, and I wrote it under duress and feeling tremendous resistance. This is where the weird stuff comes in as well. Like the journey of writing the book happened because, you know, I'm a lifelong experiencer of weird and anomalous and paranormal things. And one of the flavors of that experience is contact with these beings. I don't know, like, I don't know how to exactly who they are or how exactly to describe it, but they gave me this directive to write this book. And I thought that it was the most improbable, strangest thing that they could ask me to do. Like, you want me to write a book? And so I resisted and resisted and resisted. And the intensity around me amplified and amplified and amplified until I finally just surrendered and wrote the book. And when I say surrendered and wrote the book, like, they didn't want me to. I started writing it at one point, and it was sort of like this treatise, like this very removed, distant, philosophical kind of like ideas about life stuff. And they were like, no, we want to hear about, you know, the trauma, the experiences, the addiction, the unsafe relationships, the dramatic things, and the turn, you know, of how I survived it and how I moved through it. And it was supposed to be very, very, very personal. And so when I finally did surrender to writing the book, that's what I did. I was like, all right, I'm just going to say all the things. And I was terrified. But what they told me specifically is that writing this book will bridge the gap between these two big blocks of your life. And they showed me this image that I can still see in my mind. It was just these two huge blocks of, I don't know how to explain it. There was a before, and then the book was in the middle, and there was an after. And they said the book will bridge the gap between these two main blocks of your life. And that is exactly what it's done, which still blows my mind. Like that is a prophecy from them that came exactly true. And it's wild how different my life is before and after the book.
Well, after the book is it's less than a year, right? When did the book come out?
Right. It's less than a year. It came out in October, Earth, A Love Story. But I started writing it like 2.5 years ago. And I wrote the first, I can't remember exactly, somewhere in there. And I wrote the first, the relatively solid first draft in 6 months. And it was 2019. And so as I was writing it, I was also kind of engaging with the experiencer community for the first time in my life. I had no idea that exists. Like ufology, experiencer, didn't know those things existed. And so as I was coming to terms with my own experiences, I was also engaging with this community that was giving me context all of a sudden in a way that I had never had. And during that time, I quit my job that I had had for 15 years. My relationship ended. It was like devastating. I changed where I lived. I took on new work. Like everything in my life changed over the process of starting the book to finishing the book. Yeah. You're nodding. I know this is.
Oh, do I know? Oh, do I know?
Yeah.
There's a lot I could say. Let me just say, first found out about you through a series of interviews. I think you did a 3-part interview with Stuart Davis on his podcast called Artists and Aliens.
Aliens and Artists.
Aliens and Artists, thank you. And I listened to that show, and I heard you speak, and I heard the trepidation and the unsettled quality in your voice. Mm-hmm. And that's something I understood. And you and I talked after that. I just sought you out. I found your phone number. I called you and I said, we need to talk. And I hope I wasn't pushy or anything like that, but it was like, oh, no, we need to talk. And I hear you now, and that trepidation and that caution and that unsettledness, I'm not hearing it now. Mm-hmm. I suspect, I don't want to say your life is perfect and everything like that, but I definitely sense that that's a huge change, and I had to go through that too. So the writing of the book, when you were writing that book, you were in that place of trepidation and being unsettled and being unsure. Am I right? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that was, yes, as I was writing the book, you know, it's a memoir, basically. It's a spiritual memoir. And so as I was writing it, I was talking about the past, and I was talking about all these experiences that I had. And then at some point I got to present day, and the experiences were continuing. It was a very, very active time for experiences. It was nonstop. It was confusing. And I was just coming to terms with the fact that all of this was ontologically real, and that I wasn't crazy, because I had spent my entire life compartmentalizing this stuff and pushing it away and being terrified. So I was just like accepting the fact that this was real, and then I was having these wild ongoing experiences. And so yeah, I was writing the book in a state of like complete nervous system activation, like trauma response, writing it, you know, going through not just for the like anomalous stuff, but writing the story of my many, many years of like deep addiction, of the really traumatic experiences that I had with relationships and moving and things in my life. So it was like this unearthing of my life. I was telling this story about myself, and I was reading the story that I was telling about myself, about these true events, and integrating it in real time. And it was like it was like doing really deep therapy or something, you know, where you're just kind of like activated and triggered all the time. And I remember, I have to say, Mike, when you called me, I remember I was living in Grand Junction at that time, Grand Junction, Colorado, on the western slope, and I was hiking on this trail, something with the devil, you know, it was like Devil Canyon or Devil's Backbone or something like that. And I looked at my phone, and I think that I think I got either a message from you or an email from you. And I remember that moment so clearly because I was in shock all the time. And I was like, every time somebody affirmed it or kind of brought more reality to the situation by acknowledging it, it was another layer of shock. Like, oh shit, I'm saying this stuff. I can barely admit that it's real. And then there are these people, like I had heard of you. I was like, why is Mike Cleland? Why is he, you know, what is happening in my life? Like, it was just very, very overwhelming. And every time somebody acknowledged like the reality of it, it would be another layer of just shock and integration. And I remember after we talked, because we talked for about 2.5 hours, I literally got up from my desk where we'd been talking, and I got in bed and I just slept because it was so much. It was so overwhelming. And then somewhere in the last couple of years, all of this has integrated to a point that, yeah, I'm not in that space of being unsettled, of being in a trauma response, of being terrified. I've crossed some threshold into a new world that has space for all of this, has space for the weird, the anomalous, for the reality of my experiences. And my capacity now to hold all of that is enormous compared to how it was before. And I have to say, like, not possible without people helping me, not possible without Stuart, without you, without the experiencer group. Like I came across the threshold in a community of people, and I don't know if I could have done it without that. But yeah, like it's different now. Yeah, I'm not sweating right now.
And I could tell the same story with the people who were so kind to me, Leo Sprinkle and this guy Eric and a bunch of people right in my early stages of trying to make sense of all this. And you said you needed to surrender as far as the act of writing. Can I do something? This is something I guess this is an interview, but it's also a dialogue and a conversation. I'm going to read something. Is that okay?
Yeah. Absolutely.
This is my first book on owls, and I'm going to read the very last paragraph.
Love it.
So this is the very last paragraph. It's just a few sentences, short paragraph, and this is how I ended the book, The Messengers. I'll also say that all these experiences, or maybe the intelligence behind them, have conspired to make me write this book. That is a bold thing to say, but that's how it feels. I have tried to let go and allow a deeper story to emerge. Like sleeping under the stars on a desert night, this book has been an act of surrendering.
Chills, Mike. Yes. Yep.
And I think we both know the difficulty of surrendering. I mean, surrendering means letting go of so much, and it's not being defeated. Mm-hmm. It's like allowing a deeper truth to shine in a way that's true, as opposed to like putting the lampshade over that light and trying to block that light out.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my experience, like there was a good reason. There were good reasons why I didn't want to surrender. You know, it's approaching this event horizon where you don't know what's going to happen on the other side. It's a willing letting go of control and a deep trust on some level that something else will emerge. And it's a courageous act and a terrifying act, and worth every moment, like worth it. Never for a moment will I regret that surrender. And also, as I said before, completely transformed my life in good ways and in really hard ways. You know, everything changed. My job changed, my partner changed, where I live changed, all of it. So it was a journey of letting go of the things that I thought were keeping me safe. And that's terrifying, like without knowing what I'm going to land in on the other side, and having these kind of promises from the beings talking to me, like, this is going to bridge the gap, you know, like, that it's okay to take this journey, and that it's a necessary thing. But I had no context whatsoever, except for times in my life before where I had surrendered, but to different things. Like I had turned towards the hard thing. That's a big part of my story. It was like turning towards the hard thing. And so I knew I know that works. Like in my bones, I know that, and by works, I mean like progresses the narrative. Like if I was really stuck or really suffering or, had come to a dead end somewhere, and I was just numbing, blocking out, unwilling to turn towards the hard thing, when I finally did, that's when the narrative progressed. Like that's when the story kept going and something new happened. And for a long time, it was torture. Like it's hell. It's a very scary thing to do. And my experience is that it gets easier every time. But this surrender was a really, really big one. Yeah.
Whew. Yeah. Yeah. I was writing on a blog real time about my experiences. And I started the blog. I was just, hey, I'll start a little blog about synchronicities. And and it quickly turned into this UFO stuff, which I did not want to go there. Wow. And like I was writing in real time. So, and the blog, this is in 2009. The world has changed. We're more in an Instagram world these days, where nobody wants to read a whole blog post. They want to read, whatever, 140 characters, and that's it, So, but like I wasn't writing a memoir where I said, 10 years ago this happened. And I was like, this happened last night. And I'm trying to make sense of it this morning.
Mm-hmm. Publicly,
real time, online. And,
Yeah.
and what happened was the blog at the time, I don't know what popular means online anymore, but it had a following, and some wonderful folks were following it. Red Pill Junkie was one of the first people to really follow it. And he's been steadfast the whole time. He's really held my feet to the flame too. He did not let me, he didn't give me any wiggle room. If I learned very early on, like I couldn't like wing it and sort of pontificate without backing myself up, So he was great in that sense. But yeah, and I was heartened by the support I got from the very, very small community of the people who were reading the blog. And then that community just remains even to today. I mean, I can complain and poke fun and be cynical about this internet era, but it's allowed a form of communication that has never existed in the human experience. And so you and I can reach out to people in ways that we never could have 20 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the maybe the best part of the book, because I read it on my podcast, and that's how people first started engaging with it. I read it before it was published. I was just like on fire. It had to get out there. So I read it on my podcast, and the best thing that has happened is like I'm friends with all these people, truly real friends with all these people all over the world, in this country and other countries, who engaged with the book and basically said, like, me too, and there's that deep connection in this weird world, and also with people that can hold all this nuance and complexity. Like, this is not an easy thing to hold. It does not collapse easily into a simple, narrative that you can wrap your head around. It requires a lot of paradox holding and liminal space. And the people that I've met through, writing the book and putting it out, all are those people. It's like, I truly do feel like I found my tribe, which was a completely unexpected result. It feels very special. Yeah, it feels really special.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to UFO conferences a lot for a while, and I would just go and attend, and people would say, "You're going to a UFO conference? Why would you do that?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, to sit in a room full of people where you can turn to anyone, right or left, and say, what brings you here?" And they'll tell you a story that they have permission to tell, unfiltered, in the setting of a UFO conference. And I can do the same thing. People can ask me, like, "Why are you here?" Mm-hmm. And then I can tell them why I'm there, and they are so supportive and understanding. And that's something that I've had to explain to people. I can tell most people don't get it. Okay, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to praise your book, okay? And I'm going to say some stuff, and but this is all praise. So you sent me a Word document of your book early on, and I remember reading it, and I was just like, what is this? It was like written in a way that was, I keep on saying, like, it reminded me of like a poetry book. You go to the bookstore, and there's a mainstream section of the bookstore, and then off in one corner, there's like the poetry section. And you open any of those books, and they kind of feel different. They're formatted different. They read differently. And I was like, what is this? That's the only way I can describe it. It's like, it feels like I picked up a poetry book, and I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. Then I heard you read the book in your voice, in your pacing. And let me say, you have a wonderful, evocative voice for telling your own story. And as soon as I got about 5 sentences into the prologue of your audiobook reading, which you posted online, I was like, oh, I get it. I totally get it. I get it. Mm-hmm. I fully get this. I can fully wrap my mind around this. And so your spoken word, the written word then became alive in a different way after having heard your spoken word. Not that someone can't open the book and find a lot of power in it. They don't need to necessarily hear your voice. But for me, I found it totally vital for the process of fully understanding and tapping into what you were trying to say in that book. And it is not, all I'm going to say, you said, there are parts of that book, it is not an easy book. Mm-hmm. How to say it? Like in a story, like the protagonist has to overcome something. And the protagonist has to arrive someplace at the end of a fiction story. And you wrote a memoir that has the dynamism of that journey.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for all of that. Yeah, one thing that I was told as well was that I need to learn to use my voice. That was part of what they told me to do. You need to learn to use your voice. And I thought it was sort of a metaphor, like learn to speak your truth, or like speak up, or I don't know what I thought it was. But I've come to understand over time that it was literal. They were like, speak, and I love the book. And I know that after you listened to the podcast, you reached out to me and you were like, I get it. And I want to help you, which is, the book would not be in existence without you, Mike. 100%. I think you know that. I hope you know that. It was vital to bringing the actual physical book into the world was your help.
Was I pushy? Was I pushy at all when I was during that process?
No. Were you pushy? No, you were not pushy.
Okay.
You were clear. You were like, I know how to do this. And I was like, thank you, please do it. I believe you, do it. Because I don't know how to do this at all. Like I had no idea how to do it. It would have taken me easily another year. I'm not exaggerating, to figure out. And it wouldn't have been as nicely done. It just would have existed. So, so I love the book. I love the physical artifact of the book. And also I think that I was also supposed to speak it. I do think that was part of it as well.
Mm-hmm,
so yeah, I get that. And it was terrifying too, it's all been terrifying, but really good.
So the listeners know I do book layout, where I will do the page layout and the art direction of a book, so you open a book and it, it has, the words are on the page there and stuff like that. There's a way to format all that stuff. And it's something that's a little bit like, some people get up in the morning and make a crossword puzzle and they like to tinker with things like that. And I was like, laying out a book for me is that kind of tinkering, and I really enjoy it. So, and I tried to adhere to my very first impression of your book, that it was an art book, that it was a poetry book. And it, it doesn't look that much different than a normal book, but I tried to keep it a little bit. Here, let me say it this way. It's a self-published book. Mm-hmm. And people can hold a self-published book in their hand and they know right away, oh, this is a self-published book. So my goal, my 1,000% goal with your book was that people would pick that book up and it would feel, it would look, it would have the mood of a high-end published book that would have come from a top shelf publishing house in New York City or something like that. I wanted it to have that A+ feel, mm-hmm. because the content deserved that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. And that's what you, in my opinion, accomplished. You talked to me about things that I didn't know. I just knew nothing about it,
I taught you how to make an M dash.
Yeah, you taught me how to make an M dash. And then you're like, stop using so many M dashes. Because they're great. Yeah. They're so great. The more, the better.
To a degree, yeah. You gotta.
Yeah, to a degree.
Yeah. So salt is nice too, but you can overdo that. Yeah. So.
That's right. Yeah. And also just, the way that, that you pulled out some of the poetry and you pulled out, chapter 11 is just journal entries. And so formatting that was a whole thing unto itself. And I wouldn't have been, it would not be what it is. Like the physical artifact of that book would not be what it is without you. Your fingerprints are all over it. And I'm ecstatic that that's the case. I'm really grateful.
It's not just my fingerprints on it. There's someone else in this tribe.
Oh, heck yeah. Suzanne Chancellor. Yep.
Whose mother was also born in Denmark. Yeah.
Is that right? Oh,
yeah, Suzanne and I, if we get on the whiteboard and like all the similarities between Suzanne and I, it like fills the whiteboard up, and so.
Yeah. She dueled this book in a different way. Suzanne was my editor, and God bless her, because I'm not a normal writer, and it is very stream of consciousness. And I feel like both of you engaged with this book as a labor of love that was that felt like grace. It was just a tremendous gift to have both of you interest, like, it's such, every author would want that, would want people who were passionate about their work and wanted to help them make it the best that it could be. And I could never ask for anything more. Yeah. Both of you are, I think I call you in my foreword, the book doulas. You helped it birth into the world for sure.
Oh, and it was an honor. It was not much work on my part. Like at the end, it's a really powerful feeling for me at the end to have a clean book. And I've done other books too. I did a bunch for Joshua, and so there's a handful of people in this field that I just kind of, when I hear that they're like, oh, I'm starting to write a book, and I'm like, hey, like, just like talk to me, like, don't you be intimidated by this and that, because I can take over and with the layout of the book. I'm not going to mess with the content at all, but how it looks on the page, I've gotten really skilled at that.
Yeah, you did Joshua Cutchin's big 3-volume book, Ecology of Souls, which is amazing. Yeah.
That was work.
Oh, I can imagine. Those are huge books. Yeah.
2,500 footnotes in that book. And it's so much so that there was its own separate book, is just the footnotes. One book is just the footnotes. So that's the 3 volumes. So, book 1, book 2, and then the footnotes for book 1 and 2.
Yeah. Amazing.
Whew. Like there's like, I could not imagine a more challenging project than that. And maybe in the history of publication, there has never been a more challenging book project than that. So, and I was really super proud of the way that turned out. So that looks beautiful too.
Yeah, it does.
Oh, and he also found there was a guy named, I'm going to plug his name. I think his name is Johnny Decker. I think I got that right. Johnny Decker did the illustrations. So the cover of Joshua's book and then the interior illustrations are this guy, Johnny Decker. Wow. There was that guy got it going on. That was really a fun, powerful book. And I also can say that, like your book, like I felt that that book was important. That is an important book, Joshua's book. So here we can, we've gone on and on and on about the content around these experiences in your life. Please, could you share something? We talked a little bit about that before the microphones turned on. I'm really cautious because I go on podcasts all the time. And good grief, if I told the same story over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I don't want to put my guests through that if it's unnecessary. But is there a story that you could tell that would like bring the listeners into, what you've been through and some of your experiences?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. There are lots of stories. It's so hard, it's funny actually when people ask me about this, because, I don't know if you feel like this, but my, experience of these bizarre events are so woven together, that one from 20 years ago will inform the next one that happens 8 years later. And then, so it's actually, I do have a story to tell, but it's interesting as I'm trying to like formulate it, how to pull it out of that context. So I'll give a little bit of context for it, but just know that it sits inside of this big, broad story that started unfolding when I was a little kid. And would be taken out of my body and taken out of my bedroom and, being shown these horrific Armageddon, end of the world visions and all of that. This has been a lifelong journey for me with lots of those things going on. And I had lots of very mystical, very wild, I've had near death-like experiences. I've had spiritually transformative experiences, visions, lots of out-of-body things. And so, as I was writing the book, as I was coming to terms with all of that, for the first time, I started to get this very eerie and unwelcome feeling of there being ETs, or aliens or UFO or something around. And that's what I really resisted. I wanted nothing to do with the fact that might be what was going on. And I was pretty tortured by it. Like I couldn't sleep. I couldn't be in the house by myself without being terrified. I I felt very pestered, very badgered, lots of really weird things happening around me, which is what prompted me originally to, I found somewhere Stuart's Aliens and Artists podcast. And I would listen and go, oh my God, like I'm hearing stories about myself and I don't know what to do about it. I'm terrified. And at that time, I don't think he is anymore, but at that time, Stuart was taking clients and doing one-on-one sessions. And so I reached out to him and started telling him what was going on and, sweating and crying and really very much up against the edge of my capacity with this stuff. And of course, he held beautiful space and he helped give me some framework and context. And so as part of that, he gave me some practices to do that helped me feel safer. And as I began to feel safer, I began to get some sleep. And I started going back to like my meditation practices and things like that. And I started getting familiar with the sensations that would come along with visitations or being what felt like being pulled out of my body. And I started kind of getting a familiarity with that. And the fear lessened a little bit. I started thinking maybe I'm not under attack. Maybe something is trying to communicate or co-create with me. And as I gained the confidence to like turn towards that as a possibility, I left open this little window. Like maybe I'm not just going to try to get rid of this. Maybe I'm going to try to interact with this. It's like all in the back of my mind. So one morning I'm laying in bed and I did these morning practices that Stuart had given me, which were basically like protection practices and communicating, with an unseen team. And I asked the team, I was like, do you have any messages for me? Just kind of checking in, communicating. And I was just coming out of sleep. So I was still a little bit in that liminal in-between space. And I felt the buzzing, vibration, sensation that I've now come to associate with out-of-body experience. I'd never read like Robert Monroe. I'd never read anybody who talked about having the same experiences and that it has something to do with out-of-body, apparently, or possibly. I didn't know any of that. All I knew is that this buzzing vibration would show up and either horrific or extraordinary or ecstatic things would happen along with this buzzing experience. So I was laying in bed. I started feeling that sensation, feeling, hearing, being with, like it's a totally consuming experience to be with the light and the buzzing, the vibration. And I just overtly consented, which I'm not, this is not prescriptive. Like, I don't know if any of this is a good idea. I'm just saying this is what I did. But I just overtly consented. And I kind of remember thinking like, well, this is not my first rodeo, so I'm just going to say like, yes to this experience. Whatever's going to happen, I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to say yes to this experience. And when I did, as soon as I consented and kind of, again, surrendered to the experience, I felt myself kind of rise up, which was not uncommon. I've had that experience many, many times. But this time, I started laying in bed on my back, and I felt myself rise up, and I opened my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, I looked down my body, and it appeared that I was levitating. Like the blankets were tented over my body. It looked like I was about 3 feet off the bed, and I had risen up out of the bed and taken the blankets with me, and they were tented over my body. And I had the distinct thought of, that's never happened before. Like, that's new. This has not happened before. And then in the next instant, a more familiar experience for me just like shot out of my body. My consciousness shot out of my body, rose very quickly to the ceiling. And again, another moment of like utter clarity, being kind of pressed up against the ceiling and the wall, where the ceiling and the wall met. And I could see this line of paint, and I could see the tiny imperfections because I was so close to it, in this, what from the floor looked like a perfectly smooth line of color where the wall met the ceiling, but because I was so pressed up against it, I could see all the tiny little imperfections. And it was funny to me. I remember feeling like, that's funny. And then I shot up through the ceiling, through the roof, above my house, above the neighborhood, above the town of Grand Junction, going higher and higher and higher, like the earth getting smaller. Just going up basically into space is what it felt like into the cosmos, but into like a physical, it felt like it seemed to be space. There were stars around me and it was black. And then I stopped suddenly. And, in that space, for me, there's a lot of clarity and there's not a lot of questioning. It's not a lot of like, where's my body? Do I have eyes? How am I experiencing this? How do I know the things that I know? And so my experience was, although I didn't see anything, but the experience was I stopped and just saw, black space with stars around me. And then I had this knowing and this perception that this group, this collective that I call the Four Who Are One, who have visited me several times in my life, were right above me and they were going to give me something. And what they gave me the only way I can describe it is a contained line of light and sound. It had a beginning and an end. It was contained, and it was like the buzzing kind of condensed into this line. And they gave it to me and I took it. And the next moment of awareness, I was in bed and I wasn't where I had started. I had started like on my back, feeling that sensation of floating up. But as I kind of came to and my consciousness, was in my body and I was sideways on the bed and, it seemed like the covers were kind of halfway over my face a little bit. And I was very confused by that. I was like, this makes no sense. I don't understand. And my body felt very, very, very heavy. And I remember trying to open my eyes, and it was really difficult to open my eyes, sort of like when you're deep asleep, but you're trying to come awake. And so I was like really slowly blinking my eyes open. My body was very heavy. I pushed myself up to a seated position. I looked around the room. It was early morning, so I don't think the sun was up. It was like that pre-dawn kind of gray, misty light. And so I reached over to my right, and I had like these fairy lights, these lights strung above my bed as a headboard. And I had a little light switch for them, and I reached over and clicked the light switch and nothing happened. They didn't come on. And I thought, that's really weird. I wonder if there's been a power outage. And then I picked up my phone to try to turn on the flashlight on my phone, and I couldn't get the phone to work either. And and then it sort of dawned on me, this new awareness, and I started looking around the room and realizing that everywhere that I looked, there was what I describe as a honeycomb matrix. It was this series of hexagons all linked together, and they all contained information. So some of them were completely filled in. Some there was like code, like this block square arrangement of shapes that was specific code. And so I saw all of that, and I was looking to my left, and then I turned my head to look to the right, and I could see the honeycomb matrix fade away to my left, and then I looked to my right, and it reappeared to my right. And so wherever I looked, this was this honeycomb matrix that emerged. And then I turned my head again and looked straight in front of me at the wall, across from my bed, across the room from the end of my bed. And it was that same kind of misty, gray morning light, but it seemed like the wall was not solid. It just went back and back and back and back. And out of that space where there should be a wall walked 4 beings. And they walked into the room, and they came over to the side of the bed. And then a lot of things happened at once. One of them was that I was immediately downloaded with all this information. They explained to me what this place was, what they were doing here, what my directive was. And I'll say all of that. And then at the same time, I said to them, am I not in my body? That was my question. Like, I feel like I'm in my body, but am I not in my body? They were not impressed with that question. They were like, oh God, ask better questions. So what they told me was it all arrived at once. They said, we're showing you behind the scenes of your reality. And they almost air quoted behind the scenes. This is behind the scenes of your reality. This is what your reality hangs on. It responds to where you place your attention and the quality of that attention. And you need to learn to use the operating system of reality. And I said, am I not in my body? And the feeling that I got was they were very like, oh, geez, took a lot of work for us to get here, and you really should truly be asking better questions. And I said, I need to get back in my body. And then snap of the fingers, instant, same room, my body's in the same place, everything's exactly the same, except the honeycomb matrix is gone, and life is normal there, not four beings standing in my room. So, and then I had to go to work. I had to get up.
I hear this all the time. This is something that I hear often, and it's like so common where that doesn't get reported in our pop culture, but this is what people say, like, oh yeah, and then I had to eat breakfast and talk to my boss. Yeah. So. Right.
Yeah. And try to think of somebody I could tell what happened, and would they ever understand it? And I was distressed, it sounds like this. A lot of people are like, oh, it's such a cool experience. I wish I had experiences like yours. And I'm so grateful for my experiences. And also, it's really fucking hard. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Can I cuss on your podcast?
Oh yeah. Swear away.
Okay. Yeah. It's very difficult to have your entire reality kind of blown apart and have something happen that doesn't fit into anywhere into consensus reality, and then have it come back to normal. And yeah, you have a body and you have to get up and brush your teeth and, eat breakfast and then work all day. And it was hard. I remember being kind of angry and confused and exhausted, and the messages themselves didn't sink in for a long time. Now it's one of my most important. It's a message that I go back to over and over again, and it's directed me it's the direct result of that is that I'm part of a spiritual lineage that I sought out to try to help me understand these things and help me find ground and foundation in a balanced way when these things happen. And it was a beautiful, beautiful gift in my life. But at the time, it was really, really hard and scary and weird and horrible.
Oh, so what was the message? Just boil that message down.
This is behind the scenes of your reality. This is what reality hangs on.
Gotcha.
It responds to where you place your attention and the quality of your attention, and you need to learn to use the operating system of your reality.
That's a lesson I need to better understand and better learn. And I think I can only speak for myself, but wow.
Yeah, it kind of edges into manifestation a little bit. Like, reality responds to where our attention goes, and I've spent a long time being allergic to that stuff. I'm not a fan of the word manifestation. I'm not a fan of
The Secret. Yeah, that book, The Secret, is a little cheesy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Just create your own reality. It responds to where we place our attention and the quality of your attention. I didn't want to hear that message. I didn't want to hear I have a way to affect reality, because they didn't talk about suffering. They didn't talk about victim shaming, that, oh, does that mean this bad thing that happened to me was my fault because I wasn't thinking happy enough thoughts?
Yeah.
They left a lot of shit out, and it made me mad, and I didn't want to hear the lesson. But now, that happened. I know exactly the day it happened, January 11th, 2021. And,
wow, that's only a few years ago.
Yeah, 3 years ago. And it's taken me 3 years. It's taken me this amount of time to begin to approach that message in a way that feels grounded and that I can integrate the fact that it doesn't include, victim blaming or think happy thoughts and good things will happen to you. It's not a simple message. It's actually quite complex, and I've found support for it. But yeah, it's a really powerful message, and also it annoyed me, and I was confused and angry. And I'm not anymore, but yes.
Okay, just as far as, I'm just going to dialogue a little bit here with this, as far as, like, I made the comment about the book The Secret, which I do find a little saccharine, sugary sweet, and I'm sure there's some truth there, but it's the packaging is a little overly simplistic. Can you hear the roosters in the background?
Yeah, I can hear it, yeah.
So there's nothing I can do about that.
No, I like them.
So when I was fully in the throes of writing the Messengers, the first owl book, I was unhinged with a crazy mania of focus. And I was researching UFOs and owls, and I was getting bombarded with synchronicities that involved UFOs and owls. It was like that chapter of my life around 2009 was, I'm surprised I survived it intact. It was so intense. And I talked to a guy, his name is Dr. Kirby Surprise. He wrote a book called Synchronicity. And there's some funny stories of how we met. I won't go into that here, but I talked with him. He's a wonderful, gracious, smart guy, and he's a clinician. He works as a therapist. And I explained what was going on in my life. That, like, oh my God, I'm doing this research on owls and UFOs, and I'm getting all these synchronicities about owls and UFOs. And he was like, oh yeah, the universe is nothing but a giant, Xerox machine. It's going to just print back whatever you like put on the glass there. So you should expect that. He gave me a quote which I love. And it is, we are all just parakeets in the cage, pecking at the mirror, not realizing it's our own reflection.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of a mind puzzle. Mm-hmm. But wow, has that helped me? That's helped me be a little more at peace and more grounded in this, navigating these waters of this very complex mystery. I'll say very complex and worthwhile mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's both of those things. It's complex, it's worthwhile, what they told me is true. It's true. Reality does, just like what you said. I mean, a very, very simple example of that is, if you're in a crowd of people and you instruct your brain to look for people with red shirts, you will see all the people with red shirts. And then if you ask your brain to count all the people while you were looking that had green shirts, your brain didn't see the green shirts. Your brain saw the red shirts. So that's a really simplified way of saying, like, where we point our attention is what we see. And there's also a very, like, esoteric kind of mystical way to say that too, which is, which has to do with, big ideas like the Buddhist idea of emptiness and the mind as a mirror and all of these things. And if we can hold on to that and try and, like, work our heads around that without bypassing around suffering, that's my foundation, because I spent a lot of years bypassing around suffering, spiritually bypassing. And I needed to. I didn't have any other tools. It just was what it was. But now I can begin to approach this idea of this mirror that you're talking about in a different way, because I also will not. It again requires the holding of paradox, like suffering and creation. And that was another thing that I was told in another experience, but that is foundational to this is, what they told me to do is move from a paradigm of evolution through suffering to a paradigm of evolution through joy and creativity. And so both of those things, right? Like, suffering exists, yes. Joy and creativity exist, yes. And there is a way to evolve through deep suffering, and there is a way to evolve, consciously using that mirror through creation and joy. My feeling on it is that it's both. We cannot get rid of one or the other. It's just the condition on this planet. So, yeah. So these are all, like, the very deep things that they told me. And it's been, some of the things they told me have been with me for 20, 25 years. And I'm just, I still deepen into them more and more and more. There are these profound truths that they gave me.
Yeah, I just think of being a creative person, which I am. I'll say it, I'm an artist, which I had a really hard time saying that. I have a really hard time. Even now, I have a really hard time saying it. I went most of my life. I've worked as a professional illustrator from the age of 16. I rode my bike to an ad agency and did illustrations as a 16-year-old. And then, I worked in New York City, and I've done all these books, doing illustrations in magazines, and I would never, ever, ever call myself an artist. And last year, when I was working on The Unseen, I did the cover myself, and I was working on the cover, and I was designing the cover, and there's this thing on the back. There's this tiny little rectangle where you have to squeeze in the little bio. I have a little picture of myself, and I had to squeeze in the little bio. And my editor, she had pointed out something that I had done, and I didn't even realize it. And I couldn't fit illustrator into the thing. So an artist is a shorter word, so I just put artist.
Oh, wow.
And that was freaking monumental. It was done for the reasons. Remember, I said, I like to tinker. I like to do the book layout. It was like this decision that was based on pragmatic, this has got to fit in, and wow. And again, that was a year ago. It was a year ago this month, basically, that I did that. And I just kind of I'll just put the word artist in there. I'm looking at it right there. Yeah, I'm looking at the book right now. So the four who are one show up in your book. Did they first show up in the hypnosis session that you did with the woman? I think she was in Colorado. I can't remember the woman's name that was your hypnotherapist.
Yeah, Linda Backman. That's not the first time they showed up, but they did show up there. The first time they showed up was when I was suffering for a long time with what I categorized as sleep paralysis. It's just being paralyzed and then having beings come, and shadow beings, and feeling utter terror. Anyone who's had that experience, sleep paralysis or whatever that is, being paralyzed and taken or whatever, knows the terror of it. It's just utter terror. And I didn't have any context. I didn't know what the hell was going on. And I fought it for months and months and months. And then one particular night I was deeply fighting it. And I decided again to surrender. I just decided, you know what? I wonder what would happen if I just turned towards this thing and stopped fighting it. I don't know what else to do. I'm drowning. I don't know what else to do other than just turn towards it and let whatever's going to happen. I'm just going to let it happen. And I had a very wild experience that is long and would take a while to tell. But at the end of that experience, I came out of the experience, sat up in bed full of adrenaline over what had just happened, laid back down, instantly fell asleep, and went into this hyper real, quote unquote, dream space, although it didn't feel like a dream. And was standing on the property that I grew up on in this particular place, one valley over from the dome I grew up in. And out of the horizon line came these four huge buzzing light beings, and they were all together. So they were I saw four heads and four sets of shoulders, and the rest of their bodies were connected together. And they said, "We're here for you when you're ready." And I called them the four who are one because that's how they presented to me. And that was the first time I knew them. That was the first, it was the first time they arrived. And then, and then the second time was a very dark, horrible time when I was deep into addiction and in a very, very unsafe relationship. And I was in a blackout drunk, and I fell. And it's my only memory of that night. I have no other memories of that blackout drunk. But as I fell, they were there. They were there in the hallway as I was falling. Time slowed down, and there was just this utter urgent compassion. And they were sort of cradling me and saying it was this or something worse. And pretty quickly after that experience, I the story that I'm telling around that, which I don't, I don't know. But what it felt like is that they stopped me. They broke my leg. I broke my leg that night. And it was also the last night I took a drink. So I'm 7.5 years sober. And the sensation that I had was that they were stopping me from some terrible karma. Like I was going to really hurt myself or really hurt someone else, driving drunk or, other things that I wasn't proud of. Like they stopped me in my tracks, and I never drank again. And they did it by breaking my ankle. It was not easy, but yeah, that was the second time that the Vorhörer one, the second experience I had with them, I think.
Yeah.
I'm trying to put it all into chronological order, but I think that's right.
Yeah, that's the problem with this mystery, is that it doesn't play out in a nice, tidy, orderly way that fiction does. It's a mess.
Right.
And the tapestry, it feels like every thread in the tapestry is tied so tight to every other thread that you try to explore one little thread and it's connected to so much that it's impossible to tell one's experiences in a linear beginning to end format. You have to jump around.
That's right. That's a beautiful way to describe it. Yeah.
That messiness of the narrative is something I've come to trust. Like if someone tells you a messy story, that's inherent, which it happens to a degree in real life, but it certainly is accentuated in what you and I, in very different ways, in some ways, in very similar ways in others, but what you and I have wrestled with.
Yeah.
And tried to integrate. And also that we've both been very outspoken about it. Here's a question. I could answer it for myself, but I'll ask you. Have you received any pushback from people after sharing your story, because of sharing your story?
The fact that I have to think this hard, like if I have, it's very difficult for me to place it or remember it. I think maybe the worst thing that I've experienced is sort of a neutrality. Like somebody hears the story and goes, okay, well, that's cool. Do you want to, let's talk about something else, So maybe that's the worst that I've experienced. No, the landing has been the softest landing, which I did not expect. Like I expected pitchforks at the door. I really did. I was like, they're going to take me away. This is unsafe for me to speak about. And it has been the softest landing. More than anything, what I hear is thank you for saying it. So now I can say it and I have something to tell you. And that's, I love that. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was what I experienced too. I bet you there's people who've said stuff behind my back. No one's really said anything to my face. Some YouTube comments are kind of ugly, but don't judge your life on YouTube comments.
Right.
And so I've experienced exactly the same thing. And then there's people like Whitley Strieber, who was, there's like the Marine that has to climb over the wall first, with the hand grenades and
yeah.
And he ends up all bloody and near death. And that was Whitley Strieber climbed over the wall first. Mm-hmm. And then we all climbed over the wall after. So if it's easy for us, there's people who suffered under the slings and arrows of the meanness of people.
Yeah.
And then you and I just coasted through this.
Totally.
I mean, it wasn't coasting through the process. Our own internal process was rough, but the pushback has been essentially zero for me, and I got a 10-year head start on you.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think about the people who went first a lot. That's one of the groups of people that I'm very, very grateful for, the people that go first so that we can continue along. And Whitley Strieber, I, again, didn't know he existed until a few years ago, but his book sat on my altar, actually. I just put it on my altar, and then I would look at it and get chills and get sweaty and then not open it. But then reading it and seeing what he does for experiencers and his passion for experiencers is, like the legacy that he's left so that we can feel safe doing this. And I think it's safer and safer to do it, to come out of these closets, and the conversation feels more nuanced, and like academia is picking it up, and it's wonderful. And also the stigma exists. Like it's real, and it's understandable why people don't want to come out about it. People yeah, like, you know, as well as I do, there are people who've like lost their jobs or their family thinks they're crazy or, you know, things like that. I wonder if it's less now. I'm not really sure. But yeah, my experience was a very, very soft landing on the other side.
Yeah, I wasn't the president of the bank or anything like that. Like, I was a guy who drew cartoons and like taught people how to wipe their butts with rocks in the backcountry. So I was like,
sounds horrible.
like, I didn't have anything to lose, you know. So in fact, the illustration work, I don't know, like, probably helped a little bit. But you bent spoons with Suzanne Chancellor and Jack. I want to hear about that.
Oh man, so I went to Vermont for, I'm in a Vajrayana Buddhist lineage, and I went to Vermont for a retreat with the Sangha, and it was the first in-person retreat that we'd had, and it was amazing. And I spent 4 or 5 days with those people, having, just the most wonderful, connected experiences. And this lineage for me feels like home. Like, I feel like I found my spiritual home and framework, and I'm really, really grateful for it. So I'd come from this really heightened experience, and I was like, I'm in Vermont. I'm over on this side of the country. I'm going to go see Suzanne. Like, I'm not going to get over here again, probably for a long time. So I'm going to go visit Suzanne and Jack, which was wonderful. It was amazing. It's, again, just like being with other experiencers. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like hanging out with people who know what the fuck you're talking about. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I don't remember exactly how it came up, but we were sitting around the living room, and I think I had just interviewed Joshua Cutchin for my podcast, and I think I told that to Suzanne, and Suzanne said, I think Joshua was here that night with Mike Cleland, and we were all sitting around bending spoons. And I thought, what the hell are you talking about? You know, I didn't know a lot about spoon bending, but I didn't actually think it was a real thing. And so she's like, yeah. And she walks into the other room and comes back with a cup and all these spoons, you know, like a dozen or 15 or something bent spoons in it. And I was like, what are you talking about? And so she and Jack were like, yeah, let's bend spoons. So they
did that to me. So that's why I'm asking. Yeah. So
and it's so fun. And so they explained it to me in a couple of ways. You know, they explained it in the way that, like, makes total sense. But a lot of times when people say stuff like this, you're like, yeah, but, you know, also reality. They're like, I think Jack said something like, you know, everything is like, matter is very, we think matter is solid, but it's not. You know, it's got all these spaces between, you know, the atoms, and it's mostly energy. And I'm like, yeah, but I can't walk through a wall. Like, in my head, I'm thinking that, like, okay, I get it, but it doesn't really make sense to me. And Suzanne explained it, gave me her explanation of it, which was that there was kind of like, you set your intention and you kind of put your intention into the spoon, and then you kind of walk, like, you don't look at it, you know, don't worry about it. It's going to happen when it happens. And I had the night before a recurring dream that I have, which is that I'm in a car with someone, sometimes a spiritual teacher. I've had many of these dreams where I'm in a car with a spiritual teacher, and we're driving, the spiritual teacher's driving, and we're going around these curves, and they're going too fast, and pretty soon we're going to go off a cliff and we're going to die, and there's no getting out of it. It's like the car launches off the edge of the road, we're flying through the air, death is coming. And in that moment, the dream I had the night before, you know, understanding deeply that I was about to die, I just fully surrendered. Again, that word is coming up so much, but I just fully surrendered to the death. Just went limp, like, okay, full acceptance, full surrender, full letting go. So that experience was in my body. It was very recent. So when they gave me the spoon and they had told me this stuff, and she had kind of talked about, like, setting the attention and then just surrendering, letting go. So I was like, okay. So they gave me a spoon, and I had it for 15 minutes, probably 20 minutes. And I was like, there's no way I'm bending this fucking spoon. It's thick. It's heavy. There's no bend. There's no, like, spring to it. There's no way that I'm bending this spoon. So I had it in my hands for 15, 20 minutes. Finally, I was like, this is not going to happen for me, but maybe if I see you do it. So I handed it to Jack, and in less than, 2 minutes, certainly, maybe less than a minute, he handed it back to me bent. And I was like, okay. Like, seeing is believing. Now I understand it's possible. They gave me another spoon, and probably 30, 45 seconds, I called up that sensation in my body of just full surrender, full letting go, just full, like, no resistance whatsoever. And I had the spoon in my hand, kind of moving it back and forth. And all of a sudden, it went from not bent to bent. And I'm sure that my hands did something, but it felt like it wasn't bent and then it was bent. And it was a very wild experience. And then I bent like 3 more of their spoons, and I was like, all right, I have to stop because I'm going to bend all your spoons. This is cutlery. Like, we can't just go around bending all your spoons. But yeah, it was amazing. It was really amazing. And then I did it again, and it's very wild. Instead of just like bending it backwards, I twisted it and pretty much tied it into a knot. And I had a sensation when I did that was like, this may sound strange to people, but I had this sensation of like, this is karmically expensive. Like, do I want to expend this energy on bending a spoon, or should I put it into like being nice to my family or something? Like, it felt karmically expensive to do this, but I have this like twisty twirled bent spoon that I, again, keep on my altar as proof that reality isn't what we think it is. And I will bend spoons again, but the only time that I do it now is if I'm around somebody that would benefit from knowing that reality isn't what we think it is, because it's such a potent example of that.
I just wrote down, reality is not what we think it is. And I've been asked on podcasts, what's your goal in all this? And what do you want out of this? And I'm like, I don't care if anyone believes that owls are connected to some sort of like mythic power structure, but what I do care about, this is actually what I do care about. I don't care about it. I don't care if people believe in UFOs. I don't care if believe the alien stories. I don't care if anyone believes my stories. What I do care about is at the end of, let's say, reading one of my books, or let's say maybe even listening to a podcast that I speak on, I want people to say, to have a deeper insight that reality is not what we think it is. And the deeper reality, that's a nice way for me to wrap my mind around it. There's a deeper reality. You and I spend most of our lives in the surface reality. There is a deeper reality that is running parallel to our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And when that door cracks open, if it can be done in kind of a safe and grounded way, which it's not, like, it wasn't for me. My way was not safe and grounded. But now I kind of help people across this threshold. And so when that door cracks open, it is a doorway to an utterly enchanted, unexpected landscape that's as real as anything else. It's as real as consensus reality, if not more real.
It's more real than that.
It's more real. Yeah.
I would say we're in the illusion. You and I are like in the illusion. There's something more real than that. And I'm just saying that because this shows up all the time in UFO reports. People will be like, "Oh, I was on board the craft, and it was like everything had a hyper clarity, and it was, there's stories of." This Bud Hopkins told me this account. He said, this guy got taken from his bed, and he's on board the craft, and he realizes I don't have my glasses on. He had a really bad eyesight. I see everything perfectly clear. Something else is going on, right? I mean, it's like if there are aliens from another planet and they plucked this guy from a bed and they took him on their metal spaceship and he didn't have his glasses, everything should be blurry. Logically, something else is going on. So there's reality is much richer and much more complex, and I would also say much more playful,
right,
than we dare let ourselves believe.
Yeah, I love that. Especially now that I'm grounded and not still in trauma about the whole thing. The playfulness is, feels wonderful. It feels like, when the lightness comes back in, when the playfulness comes back in, when that's possible again, and life feels alive, and I feel alive. That's the juice. Like, to me, that has been the journey, this weird journey of all these bizarre experiences and everything that I've gone through. Strangely led to reigniting my emotional body, inhabiting my physical body in a way that I never have. So it led to a very human experience, like an experience of being alive on the planet as a human, but with all of these things that I had pushed away now integrated. So it's like the magic or the mystery or the unknown, a little bit of it has been integrated into me, into my body, into who I am. And so now my life is more that. My life, the illusion, the everyday life contains more of that mystery and joy and aliveness, which is a weird thing to happen from, seeing a UFO or having ETs visit you, or like, it's not, I wouldn't have bet that that's where I'd end up. It's strange, but that's the case.
I'm there too, and it's not easy, right? Life is still hard. Like, I still got challenges, and there's issues and problems and such, but like, I now live in a magical universe. Like, I see magic in the simplest things. In a strict materialist would roll their eyes. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, as simplistic as this must seem to some people, it brings me a great amount of comfort. Isn't the right word. It's been engaging. I'm like engaged in life in a way that's much different than a previous chapter of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, you used a word earlier, that it's rich, and that's a word that I use as well. Yeah, there's a richness to it that is worth it. I hate to say it, like, every time I say something like that, like, it's worth it, I'm speaking for myself, because I can still feel the people that are in deep trauma about these things. And I remember when I was in deep trauma, like, it didn't feel great to have people be like, yeah, it's so hard, but it's look at the silver lining. So I'm conscious of people still really suffering with this stuff. For me, it was worth it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The hard things are worth it. If we survive them, like, if we can have help, if we can find community, if we can, make it through intact, and not everybody does, but if we can, there's a turn that can happen. There is a turn that can happen, and that does over and over and over and over. Like, people, this is a very human journey to go through the hard thing, to be restructured, reordered, everything changed, everything kind of like torn apart and put back together, and then come to the other side of it. That's a very human story.
And for me, it is the story. This is what I depend on. The story. I don't want a scientist or an academic to present me with a footnoted document that encompasses the complexity of this mystery. I want to hear someone's story. I want to feel the power of the story subconsciously, internally, in my bones. I don't want to address this story. I don't want to address this mystery intellectually, analytically, because that's not how I am. I love the story. I'm a disciple of the story. And I will also say that I am an artist, which is, again, hard for me to say, but I am an artist, and I relish the subconscious or elusive mood that comes with these experiences.
Yeah. That's where the gold is. And yeah, getting acclimated to turning towards that and finding some sense of safety. Like, to me, it always still feels a little bit unsafe, but that's part of the mystery. It's like, it's not neatly packaged. It does require a journey and a story and an unfolding and a sense of like adventure and discovery, and it's hard and it's beautiful.
And that's life, yeah. Right? You said it was dangerous, but I mean, making a left turn in traffic is dangerous. We do dangerous things all the time. We need to All those roosters.
Reminds me of Hawaii. Hawaii is full of roosters. Crow at 3 a.m.
Yeah. So there's no way we can top this. As far as like, we should tip our hats and say this has been a joyous, wonderful conversation. We pulled it off.
We did it.
And how do people get a hold of you?
You can find me on my website, which is honeyheart, one word, honeyheart.org. I'm also on Instagram, but you can find like all of the things. My Instagram, my newsletter, my offerings are all through honeyheart.org.
Well, there's one more thing. What about the book? Push the book.
Oh, right. I have a book. So
we didn't even name the title. Tell us the title of the book. And I'll do the little intro in the beginning, and I'll make sure that they know the title ahead of time. But what's the title?
Yeah, my book is called Earth, a Love Story. And that's what my podcast is called as well. So the first 15 episodes of the podcast are me reading my book. So it's basically just a big audiobook. And then after that, the podcast is a mix of solo episodes and me interviewing people. You have been on my podcast. You're one of those episodes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So Earth, a Love Story, the book, Earth, a Love Story, the podcast, honeyheart.org. Those are all the things, I think.
When you're doing work with helping folks with coaching.
I do. So that's through honeyheart.org. So yeah, I see people in one-on-one sessions for a variety of things. Mostly it's people who have had weird experiences that they can't make sense of, or who really feel this call to move from consensus reality world into a more kind of mystical, alive world that we were just talking about, and wanting support doing that. I also do past life regressions and between life regressions. That's part of my work. Yes, I do.
Wow.
I know you got excited. Yeah. So, and it can be done remotely or in person. And I'm the community manager of the Experiencer Group as well. So the Experiencer Group is it's a private, online, vetted community. You have to apply to get into it. And because we don't want trolls, we don't want people who are just kind of hanging out, for the stories. But for experiencers who need support, who need community support, it's a beautiful resource. You can sign up for that at forexperiencers.com. And is that all my things?
I think so. Yeah.
You keep reminding me of all the things that I'm doing, and I'm like, oh yeah, I do that and I do that. Yeah. I think that's all the things.
Great. This has been a joy.
It has been a total joy. Thank you so much, Mike.
It's my honor. This has been tremendously my honor. This is Mike chiming in after the editing. This was a true conversation, and it repeatedly circled back to surrendering. Robin used that word a lot, surrender, and I understand the power and challenge of that act. There isn't much I can add here. She said it all so beautifully. Now, what follows is the preface of her book. You'll hear her voice reading her own words. This 9-minute excerpt will give you a good idea of the haunting mood of her book, Earth, a Love Story. And after this clip, I won't be coming back. This podcast will fade out and end. So I will share my gratitude now and let Robin have the final word. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. Bye now.
Earth, a Love Story, written and read by Robin Lassiter. Preface. This is a true story. I'm not going to tell it the way it happened. I don't have a high perch where I looked down from above and watched it all play out, noting this and that, keeping track of how that thing wove into this thing, and seeing clearly what it all meant. No, I'm telling it the way I remember it, the way I experienced it down here, deep down in my body, in and through my most intimate relationship to life, looking out through my eyes. Did I wrangle this story of my life into being, trying to force a narrative, trying to control outcomes, and trying to make the world bend to my small whims? Or did this story wrangle me, moving through me, writhing and contorting me, an expression of that ineffable thing that animates us all, uninterested in my flailing? Both, probably. Either way, I did not want to write this book. I especially didn't want to write it the way that they wanted me to write it. I've spent a long time getting my life together and crafting a semblance of normality, something that from the outside could almost be mistaken for a regular person. And now after all of the drama and pain and abuse and flailing are behind me, now they want me to talk not only about all that, but all of the other stuff too. The aliens, the craft, the dreams, the visitors, the times I left my body. Not only am I left with the isolating residue of all of those experiences, but now I'm supposed to order it into some meaning and tell you about it. I wouldn't have done it. I tried not to do it. After all, this pressure has been with me for as long as I can remember, and I've spent a lot of time and energy getting really good at ignoring it. They keep turning up the dial, though, and it's ramped up now to a level that makes it impossible to ignore. Have you ever had the feeling that someone is standing directly behind you, so close that you can feel their breath on your neck, and you do not want to turn around, but when you finally do, there's no one there? Do you, for no good reason except for that incessant pressure, that unrelenting, inescapable presence, look behind the shower curtains and under each bed and in every closet and double and triple check the doors and windows every night before you can fall asleep? Have you ever been plagued night after night by dreams that wake you up at 3 a.m. and insist that you're supposed to be doing something that you're not doing? Dreams that insist you are simply not prepared for whatever is coming, that it is incredibly important that you put down whatever meaningless shit you've got going on. You know, like your career, your relationship, your goals, your hobbies, your health, your preferences, the dishes, getting your oil changed, organizing your closet, and focus everything on whatever it is that you're not doing. And also for some reason, they keep it super vague. It's a big puzzle to piece together. Okay, I admit it is fun sometimes. There's magic, exceptional beauty, an exhilarating feeling of brushing up against something really real and big and meaningful. A heightened sense of immediacy, a visceral feeling that something vital and urgent and important is happening. It's not all scary and confusing. And if I'm honest, it is what has kept me here on this planet. It's why I haven't checked out and gone somewhere else, even though I've so often longed to return home. To return to some home I can't even remember, to find some peace and rest and not have to do all the things we have to do here. I'm still here because there's a gorgeous novelty, a magical quality, proof that reality is much, much bigger than it seems. Somehow the things in my life that have made the least sense are the things that ended up giving me the most. At the same time, though, there's a palpable, inescapable gravity. Kind of takes the fun out of it. So fine, I'm writing the book. I'm writing it because the aliens, the beings made of light, and that buzzing electric resonance told me to. And I'll start with the thing I want to say the least. The reason I'm dragging up all of these memories from where they were safely sleeping, and why I'm cataloging these experiences of the weird, the other, the odd, plus the trauma and drama. It's why I'm making myself vulnerable to be dismissed, vulnerable to be ridiculed, just vulnerable. I'll start with what I'm most afraid of saying because it's what I've had the hardest time accepting, but also because it's the thing that's become the most real to me. It brought together my big scattered mess of a life and gave me a clear, ringing purpose, a trustworthy, orienting touchstone. I have no idea what will happen next after I complete the book, now that I've relented. Maybe the pressure will go away. Maybe they'll stop talking to me. Maybe they'll stop pulling me out of my body, levitating me out of my bedroom at 5:30 a.m. on a Tuesday. Maybe I'll be able to spend some time on my hobbies, keep my house clean, make some progress on those goals, finally get my core tight. You know, the stuff we're all supposed to be doing while the world is burning down around us. To learn more, visit me at honeyheart.org.
What you just listened to was the YouTube version of the Hidden Experience audio podcast. This show is hosted by Mike Cleland, and that's me, and it is available on most of the popular podcast platforms. Just search out Hidden Experience Audio. And if you want to support the show, you can find it on Patreon, as well as Buy Me a Coffee. This YouTube version has ads, but the audio version is always ad-free. And you can also join my YouTube channel here. Thank you so much for listening, and please support this show.